Welcome to Mindfulness, a space where we talk openly about life's struggles, joys, and the small steps that help us heal. If you're reading this, chances are you or someone you love has felt the weight of cigarettes, drugs, or the cravings that seem impossible to shake. You're not alone. I've been there too, sitting in a quiet room, wishing I could escape the cycle, wondering if peace was even possible. I remember one evening, years ago, when the smoke from a cigarette curled into the night sky like a question mark. I asked myself, why do I keep reaching for this, even when I know it's hurting me? That same night, I stumbled upon the writings of Thich Nhat Hanh, the beloved Vietnamese Zen master. He spoke about holding our suffering like a mother holds her crying child, not pushing it away, not running from it, just being with it, with tenderness. Something in me softened that night. Addiction often feels like a battle between who we want to be and the habits that keep pulling us back. But mindfulness teaches us something radical. We don't have to fight our cravings. We can sit with them, notice them, even breathe with them. That's where healing begins. Carl Jung, one of the most influential voices in modern psychology, once said, "What you resist persists." In other words, the harder we push something away, the stronger it comes back. This mirrors what the Buddha taught more than 2,500 years ago. Suffering lessens when we stop clinging and stop rejecting. Imagine that. Wisdom from an ancient teacher and a modern psychologist pointing us to the same truth. I think about how simple it sounds. Just breathe. Just notice. And yet, when you're deep in the grip of addiction, it feels impossible. That's why mindfulness isn't about quick fixes. It's about practice. One breath, one step, one small act of kindness toward yourself. Here's the thing. No one wakes up in the morning dreaming of becoming dependent on cigarettes, alcohol, or drugs. We reach for these things because at some point they gave us comfort, a break, a moment of relief from stress, loneliness, or pain. Thich Nhat Hanh often reminded his students, we are not bad people because we suffer. We suffer because we have not yet learned another way. Those words still give me chills. And there is another way. Across the United States today, countless teachers, therapists, and meditation guides are carrying forward this message. People like Jon Kabat-Zinn, who introduced mindfulness into hospitals to help patients with chronic pain. Or Jack Kornfield, whose gentle voice has guided thousands through the wilderness of their own hearts. They all echo the same truth. Mindfulness is not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming present. When I think back to that night with the cigarette, I wish someone had told me this. You don't have to quit out of sheer willpower. You don't have to hate yourself into change. You just have to begin with one mindful breath. Feel the smoke in your lungs, the ache in your chest, the longing behind the craving. Witness it. That's already a victory. The journey of overcoming addiction with mindfulness is not glamorous. It's not about sitting on a cushion and suddenly becoming free. It's about learning to pause in the middle of discomfort. It's about building a friendship with yourself. It's about noticing the cigarette in your hand, the bottle on the table, the pill in your palm, and instead of numbing out, gently asking, what is it that I really need right now? Sometimes the answer is rest. Sometimes it's connection. Sometimes it's just a glass of water. And sometimes, yes, it's simply the courage to take another breath and wait for the craving to pass. This is the heart of mindfulness, showing up for yourself in each moment without judgment. The Buddha called it right mindfulness, the practice of being fully aware of body, feelings, and mind. Thich Nhat Hanh made it even simpler. When you breathe in and you know you're breathing in, that is already mindfulness. So let's start here together. Before we dive deeper into how mindfulness can transform our relationship with tobacco, drugs, and the patterns that keep us stuck, I invite you to pause for just a moment. Breathe in. Notice the air filling your lungs. Breathe out. Feel the release. That breath, this moment, is a doorway to freedom. Mindfulness and tobacco, breathing beyond the smoke. When we talk about cigarettes, it's easy to get caught in numbers. How many packs a day? How many years smoked? How many times someone has tried to quit? But behind every cigarette is a story. For some, it's a moment of comfort in the middle of stress. For others, it's a ritual tied to friendship, late-night conversations, or even a way to pause during long workdays. I know people who say the first cigarette of the morning feels like a deep exhale, a way to start the day with clarity. But what begins as relief often becomes chains. I remember a friend who carried a pack everywhere he went. He told me once, "It's not even the nicotine I want, it's the break." That struck me. So much of smoking isn't about the cigarette itself, but about the pause it provides. And that pause is exactly where mindfulness can step in. Instead of reaching for smoke, we can reach for breath. Thich Nhat Hanh often reminded us, breathing in, I calm my body. Breathing out, I smile. It sounds almost too simple, but when you're in the middle of a craving, it can be profound. The act of noticing the breath gives us the very pause that smokers seek from cigarettes, without the cost to our lungs. There's science backing this up too. Researchers at Yale and Brown University have studied how mindfulness-based practices help people quit smoking. One study showed that mindfulness training was twice as effective as traditional programs. Why? Because instead of fighting cravings, people learned to observe them. They discovered that the urge to smoke, like a passing cloud, always changes. It rises, peaks, and then fades. Carl Jung would have called this shadow work, the courage to look at the parts of ourselves we'd rather avoid. The craving is uncomfortable, yes, but by sitting with it mindfully, we learn it's not permanent. This is exactly what the Buddha taught. All phenomena are impermanent. Cravings come and go, like waves. And when we can ride the wave without clinging to it, we begin to taste freedom. I once tried an experiment when I felt the urge to smoke. Instead of lighting up, I closed my eyes and asked myself, what does this craving feel like in my body? I noticed tightness in my chest, restlessness in my hands, and a kind of ache in my throat. I just sat with it. At first, the discomfort grew stronger, but then, slowly, it softened. After a few minutes, the craving wasn't gone, but it was weaker. And most importantly, I realized I wasn't powerless. I had another choice. Many American meditation teachers speak of this moment as the sacred pause. Tara Brach, a psychologist and meditation guide, often invites people to pause before acting on impulse. She says that in that pause, we create space for wisdom and compassion. With tobacco, the sacred pause might be as simple as taking 3 mindful breaths before lighting up. Sometimes you'll still smoke afterward. But sometimes, that pause is enough to choose differently. One man in a mindfulness group I attended shared how he replaced his morning cigarette with a cup of tea. At first, it felt incomplete, like something was missing. But over time, he realized the tea gave him the same pause, the same ritual, only now it nourished his body instead of harming it. Thich Nhat Hanh often spoke of drinking tea as a meditation, holding the cup, breathing in the steam, tasting each sip with presence. In that moment, the tea becomes a friend, a grounding practice. Quitting smoking is rarely a straight line. There are relapses, frustrations, and days when the urge feels unbearable. But mindfulness doesn't demand perfection. As Jack Kornfield once said, no matter how many times you fall, you can always begin again. Each breath is a chance to return. Each moment is a chance to care for yourself. The beauty of mindfulness is that it doesn't shame us for smoking. It doesn't label us as weak or broken. Instead, it invites us to look deeply. What is the cigarette giving me right now? Maybe it's comfort. Maybe it's escape. Maybe it's just something to do with our hands when we feel anxious. Once we know the answer, we can begin to find healthier ways to meet that need. The Buddha compared unwholesome habits to arrows that wound us again and again. But he also said that awareness is the path to pulling those arrows out. Tobacco may feel like a lifelong chain, but mindfulness teaches us that freedom is built breath by breath. Each mindful inhale is already loosening the knot. So the next time you feel the urge to smoke, try this. Pause. Place your hand gently on your chest. Feel your breath moving in and out. Whisper to yourself, "This is a craving. It will pass." And then simply watch. You may be surprised by how strong and how temporary the craving really is. Freedom begins with noticing. Healing begins with breath. And the pause you long for is already here, waiting for you in the next inhale. Mindfulness and drugs. Meeting the deeper cravings. When it comes to drugs, the conversation becomes heavier, more raw. Unlike tobacco, which society often tolerates, drug use is still surrounded by deep shame and silence. People battling addiction are often treated as if they are broken beyond repair. But mindfulness teaches us a radically different view. No one is beyond healing, and even in the darkest struggles, there is a seed of awakening. I remember sitting in a mindfulness circle years ago, where one man spoke about his journey with heroin. His voice was steady, but his eyes told the story of years spent running from pain. He said, "The first time I used, it felt like the world finally stopped hurting. But after that, all I was doing was chasing the memory of that first time." The room was quiet. Then the teacher, a student of Thich Nhat Hanh, gently said, "The relief you were searching for has always been inside you. The practice is learning to touch it without the drug." That struck me deeply. Drugs often begin as an attempt to soothe something unbearable: trauma, loneliness, grief. Carl Jung once said that every form of addiction is bad, no matter whether the narcotic be alcohol, morphine, or idealism, because it substitutes the whole human being with one partial satisfaction. What he meant is that addiction shrinks our vast humanity into a single desperate craving. Mindfulness, on the other hand, helps us reclaim that wholeness. Science is catching up to this truth. Programs across the U.S., from rehabilitation centers in California to community groups in New York, are now using mindfulness-based relapse prevention. Studies show that people who practice mindfulness are less likely to relapse because they learn to recognize the urge surfing process, the ability to ride out cravings like waves, knowing they will rise and fall. Instead of reacting automatically, they learn to pause, breathe, and choose. One teacher I deeply admire, John Kabat-Zinn, often reminds us, "You can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf." For someone struggling with drug addiction, this is more than a metaphor. The craving comes like a storm, but if you can stand in the storm with awareness, feel the body shaking, the mind racing, the heart aching, and remind yourself, this too will pass, then you've already begun to loosen the grip of the drug. A recovering addict once shared in a retreat I attended, "The first time I sat through a craving without using, I cried. Not because I was suffering, but because I realized I was stronger than I thought." That moment of recognition is priceless. It's the birth of trust in oneself. The Buddha taught that suffering is a teacher. Every craving is a message, pointing us towards something unresolved. When someone uses cocaine or opioids, what are they reaching for? Sometimes it's energy, sometimes escape, sometimes just a break from unbearable inner noise. Thich Nhat Hanh would call this the cry of the wounded child within. And mindfulness is about holding that inner child with care. In American mindfulness communities, teachers like Jack Kornfield and Tara Brach often speak of radical acceptance. This doesn't mean approving of harmful behavior. It means recognizing, without judgment, what is true in this moment. For someone struggling with drugs, radical acceptance might look like saying, "Yes, I feel this craving. Yes, I feel broken. But I am here and I am breathing." From that place of acceptance, real change becomes possible. I once met a young woman who had been sober for 6 months after years of battling meth addiction. She told me, "Mindfulness gave me a pause button. Before, I was on autopilot. I felt the craving and I used. But now I know I can stop, even just for a few breaths. Sometimes I still relapse, but I don't hate myself for it anymore. I just begin again." Her words echo Jack Kornfield's reminder that every moment is a chance to start over. It's important to say this clearly. Mindfulness is not a miracle cure. It won't erase cravings overnight. It won't erase trauma, but it does offer a path. It gives us the strength to face discomfort without running. It helps us see that the drug is not the enemy. The true challenge is learning to meet our pain with compassion instead of avoidance. The Buddha once told his disciples, "There is no fire like passion, no grip like hatred, no snare like delusion, no river like craving. For those caught in addiction, that river feels endless." But mindfulness shows us that even the strongest river is made of drops. If we can meet one craving at a time, one breath at a time, we can learn to cross to the other shore. So if you or someone you love is struggling with drugs, remember this: freedom is possible. Not by hating the craving, not by pretending it isn't there, but by holding it gently, like a passing storm. Your breath is stronger than you know. And every time you choose awareness over impulse, you are already stepping into a new life. Mindfulness in daily life. Small steps toward freedom recovery isn't only about big breakthroughs in therapy rooms or meditation halls. It's about what happens in the everyday moments. When the craving hits on your lunch break, when stress piles up after a long day, or when loneliness sneaks in late at night. This is where mindfulness shines most, in the ordinary rhythm of life. Thich Nhat Hanh often said, "Peace is every step." He reminded us that mindfulness is not just for sitting quietly with eyes closed. It's for walking, eating, washing dishes, even brushing your teeth. Each of these small acts can become a moment of healing if we bring our full attention to it. And for people recovering from tobacco or drugs, these ordinary moments are the battlefield and also the sanctuary. I remember visiting a mindfulness retreat in California where the bell would sound every hour. Everyone stopped, no matter what they were doing, writing, eating, walking, and took 3 conscious breaths. At first, I thought it was unnecessary, but then I noticed something. Those tiny pauses changed the whole atmosphere. Stress softened, conversations became kinder, and most importantly, people remembered to come back to themselves. Imagine if we had bells like that in our daily lives, especially in moments when cravings hit. In truth, the bell can be anything: a traffic light, a phone notification, the sound of your own inhale. Tara Brach often calls this the sacred pause, the moment you step out of autopilot and choose presence. For someone trying to quit smoking, that might mean pausing before lighting up, just long enough to feel the craving fully. For someone recovering from drugs, it might mean noticing the restlessness in the body and saying gently, "Yes, I feel this, and I can breathe with it." Carl Jung once wrote that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Mindfulness helps us make the unconscious visible. The craving that once seemed unstoppable becomes something we can observe. The stress that once drove us to smoke or use drugs becomes something we can soothe with breath, movement, or compassion. One practice I've seen work wonders is mindful walking. Instead of rushing from one place to another, you walk slowly, feeling each step touch the ground. Thich Nhat Hanh called it walking as if you are kissing the earth with your feet. I've met people who replaced their cigarette breaks with 5 minutes of walking meditation. At first, it felt awkward, but slowly it became a new kind of ritual, a way to pause, reset, and find calm without reaching for smoke. Another simple practice is mindful eating. Many people in recovery struggle with using food as a substitute for drugs or cigarettes. Mindful eating transforms a meal into a meditation. You notice the colors, textures, smells, and flavors. You chew slowly. You feel gratitude for the food. Suddenly, the meal is not about filling a hole, but about nourishing the body. Jack Kornfield often reminds his students, mindfulness is love in action. Eating this way is exactly that, love for yourself in each bite. Even everyday chores can become allies in recovery. Washing dishes can be a meditation. Feel the warm water, notice the movements of your hands, breathe with each plate. Folding laundry can be an act of grounding. Notice the fabric, the rhythm, the quiet. These moments may seem small, but they are powerful. They give us a sense of stability, a reminder that peace is always available in the present moment. In American mindfulness communities, many teachers encourage creating anchor practices. These are small rituals woven into daily life that bring you back to the present. It could be making your bed slowly in the morning, lighting a candle before you eat, or writing down 3 things you're grateful for each night. These anchors keep us steady when cravings or stress try to sweep us away. The Buddha once said, "Drop by drop, the water pot is filled." Likewise, the wise person, gathering it little by little, fills themselves with good. Recovery is like that. It's not about one giant act of willpower. It's about filling yourself with presence, kindness, and awareness, drop by drop, moment by moment. I think back to a man I met in a mindfulness-based recovery group. He said, "I used to think freedom meant never craving again. Now I realize freedom is knowing I can live with the craving without letting it control me." His freedom wasn't a single moment of triumph. It was built in the small choices, walking instead of smoking, breathing instead of reaching for a pill, pausing instead of reacting. The miracle of mindfulness is not that it makes cravings vanish. It's that it gives us another way to live with them. It shows us that even in the middle of discomfort, we can still touch peace. Every mindful step, every conscious breath, every simple act of awareness is a doorway to healing. So if you're walking through recovery right now, remember, you don't need to wait for some grand moment of enlightenment. Your healing was already here, hidden in the dishes, the tea, the footsteps, the breath. Every small act of mindfulness is a victory, and each one brings you closer to the freedom you seek. Long-term recovery and relapse prevention through mindfulness. Recovery is not a straight path. It is full of peaks and valleys, victories and setbacks. Anyone who has walked this road knows that relapse is not failure. It is part of the process. What matters is how we meet those moments. This is where mindfulness becomes more than a practice. It becomes a companion for life. Thich Nhat Hanh once said, "No mud, no lotus." Without the mud of our suffering, there is no lotus of awakening. Long-term recovery is not about erasing the mud of addiction. It's about learning to use it as soil for growth. When we slip, mindfulness helps us return to the present instead of drowning in shame. I remember talking to a man in a recovery group who had been sober for 3 years. He said, "I used to think relapse meant I was back at zero. But through mindfulness, I've learned that each time I fall differently. I get up faster. I understand myself better. I'm not back at zero. I'm further along than I realize." His words reminded me of Jack Kornfield's teaching. The trouble is, you think you are supposed to be perfect. You are not. You are meant to be whole. Relapse prevention in mindfulness is less about willpower and more about awareness. It's about learning to recognize the early signals, stress, loneliness, boredom, anger, before they spiral into craving. Psychologists call this urge surfing. Instead of being swept away by the urge, you ride it with curiosity. You notice its rise and fall. You remember that no wave lasts forever. Jon Kabat-Zinn put it beautifully. You can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. In long-term recovery, mindfulness also teaches us to care for the body. Addiction often leaves the body depleted and ignored, but mindful movement, yoga, tai chi, even simple stretching, helps reconnect us with our physical selves. Thich Nhat Hanh often led walking meditations in nature, reminding his students, "You have already arrived." For people in recovery, this is powerful. You don't need to chase freedom in the future. You can touch it in the present, step by step. Carl Jung wrote that addiction is often a misguided spiritual search. Drugs, tobacco, alcohol, they all give a fleeting glimpse of transcendence, but at a cost. In long-term recovery, mindfulness offers what the substances promised but could never deliver: true connection to ourselves, others, and life itself. This is why so many in recovery describe mindfulness not just as therapy, but as a spiritual path. One woman I met in a mindfulness retreat shared that after 10 years of struggling with relapse, what finally helped her was a daily gratitude practice. Every night, she wrote down 3 small things she was grateful for. At first, it felt silly, she said, but then I noticed the cravings were weaker when my heart was full of gratitude. I didn't need to escape as much. Gratitude became her relapse prevention tool. The Buddha taught about right effort, the practice of preventing unwholesome states from arising and nurturing wholesome ones that are already present. In recovery, this means making small, consistent efforts, surrounding yourself with supportive people, practicing daily mindfulness, and being kind to yourself when you stumble. It's not about force, it's about steady care. Tara Brach often speaks about the power of compassion in relapse prevention. She encourages people to place a hand on their heart when shame arises and whisper to themselves, "It's okay, sweetheart." This simple act transforms relapse from a moment of self-hatred into a moment of learning. Shame feeds the cycle of addiction. Compassion breaks it. Long-term recovery is also about building a new identity. You are no longer a smoker or an addict. You are a human being who is practicing freedom day by day. Mindfulness supports this identity shift by grounding you in the present rather than chaining you to the past. Each breath says, "I am here. I am alive. I am more than my craving." One of Thich Nhat Hanh's most famous teachings is, the present moment is filled with joy and happiness. If you are attentive, you will see it. In long-term recovery, this is the heart of mindfulness. We don't stay sober by resisting life. We stay sober by falling in love with life again. By learning to savor a sunrise, a kind word, a shared laugh, a sip of tea. These are the treasures that no drug, no cigarette, no escape can ever give. So if you find yourself afraid of relapse, remember this: every breath is a chance to begin again. You are not defined by how many times you fall, but by your willingness to rise. Mindfulness is your handrail on the path, steady and constant, reminding you that freedom is not a destination. It is a practice, a way of living, available right here, right now. The power of community. Healing together. Addiction thrives in isolation. Recovery blooms in connection. One of the deepest lessons mindfulness teaches is that we cannot heal alone. We need each other. Thich Nhat Hanh often used the word Sangha, a community of practice. He said the next Buddha may take the form of a community, practicing understanding and loving kindness. For those walking the long road of recovery, this could not be more true. I remember my first time attending a mindfulness recovery group. I was nervous, convinced I didn't belong. But then, one by one, people began to share their stories. The man who had just lost his job and lit a cigarette for comfort. The woman who had relapsed after 6 months sober. The young person who said mindfulness was the first thing that made them feel human again. In that circle, I realized something. My pain was not just mine. Their stories were echoes of my own. And in that shared space, my shame began to soften. Community is more than support, it is medicine. When we sit with others who are also practicing mindfulness, something shifts. The energy of the group carries us when our own strength falters. Tara Brach often says that healing happens in love. Community is where that love becomes tangible. In the United States, mindfulness-based support groups have sprung up everywhere, from hospitals to yoga studios to recovery centers. Programs like mindfulness-based relapse prevention invite people to practice together, to share openly, and to remind one another that no one is alone in their struggle. Research shows that people who engage in group mindfulness programs are more likely to sustain long-term recovery than those who practice alone. Why? Because community builds accountability, encouragement, and hope. Carl Jung believed that much of our suffering comes from being cut off, from our own inner depths and from others. He wrote, "Loneliness does not come from being alone, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to us. In mindfulness communities, we learn to communicate not through grand speeches, but through presence. Sitting silently side by side, breathing together, can say more than 1,000 words. Thich Nhat Hanh taught a beautiful practice called deep listening. In Sangha, we practice listening without judgment, without interruption, without trying to fix. Just listening. For someone in recovery, being heard in this way can be life-changing. So often, addiction grows out of a desperate need to be seen, to be understood. Deep listening gives that gift, quietly, compassionately. I recall a young man in a community group who shared that each time he relapsed, he was terrified to come back. But every time, the group welcomed him with open arms. No judgment, no shaming, just a reminder, you are still part of us. That acceptance became his lifeline. He told me, the cravings didn't disappear, but the loneliness did, and that made all the difference. Community also teaches us joy. In recovery, life can feel like a constant struggle, but Sangha reminds us to laugh, to celebrate small victories, to share meals, to walk in nature together. Jack Kornfield often says, joy is not for later. Joy is for now. When we experience joy in community, it nourishes the heart, making relapse less tempting. The Buddha taught about the three jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, teachings, and the Sangha, community. He called Sangha the most reliable refuge. Why? Because when our practice wavers, the community sustains us. When our hope fades, the community lights a candle. When we forget who we are, the community reflects our true nature back to us. One of the most beautiful things I've seen in American mindfulness communities is the practice of sharing circles. Each person speaks from the heart. No advice, no crosstalk, just sharing in silence. The honesty in those circles is breathtaking. People admit their fears, their cravings, their small triumphs. And in that honesty, healing spreads like ripples in water. If you are walking the path of recovery, find your Sangha. Maybe it's a mindfulness group in your city. Maybe it's an online community. Maybe it's a circle of friends who agree to sit and breathe together once a week. What matters is that you do not walk alone. Thich Nhat Hanh often said, a flower cannot bloom without sunshine, and a person cannot live without love. Recovery is not only about breaking free from substances, it is about blooming again. And the sunshine of community, of Sangha, gives us the warmth to grow. So let yourself lean on others. Let yourself be held. And when you are strong, hold someone else. This is how mindfulness transforms from a personal practice into a shared path. Together, step by step, breath by breath, we discover that healing is not just possible, it is inevitable when we walk it in love. When I look back at the journey we've taken, through tobacco, drugs, cravings, relapse, and the healing power of community, I see one thread woven through it all: mindfulness. Not as an abstract philosophy, not as a lofty ideal, but as a lived practice. A way of coming home to ourselves, no matter how far we've wandered. Thich Nhat Hanh often said, the miracle is not to walk on water. The miracle is to walk on the earth. For those of us who have struggled with addiction, this miracle is even more profound. To wake up in the morning without reaching for a cigarette, to breathe through a craving without collapsing, to share our story without shame, to walk through a day, just one day, with presence and compassion. That is the true miracle. Carl Jung reminded us that what we resist persists. Addiction feeds on resistance, resisting our pain, our loneliness, our fear. But mindfulness invites us to do something radically different, to stop running, to turn toward our suffering with tenderness, to hold it, breathe with it, and discover that inside the craving is not an enemy, but a wounded part of ourselves calling out for love. In the United States, teachers like Jon Kabat-Zinn, Jack Kornfield, and Tara Brach continue to echo this wisdom. They remind us that mindfulness is not about perfection, it's about presence. Each relapse, each setback, each struggle is not a sign of failure, but an invitation to begin again. Every breath is a fresh start. I think of the people I've met in mindfulness recovery circles. The woman who replaced her morning cigarette with tea, the young man who rode out his first heroin craving with tears and breath, the group that welcomed each member back after relapse without judgment. Their stories remind me of one simple truth: healing is not solitary. We heal together. In Sangha, in community, in love. And so we arrive here together at the end of these reflections, but not the end of the journey. Because mindfulness is never finished. It is alive in this very moment. In your inhale, in your exhale, in the pause between. The Buddha's final words to his students were, "Be a lamp unto yourselves." That lamp is already within you. Every time you breathe mindfully, every time you pause instead of reacting, every time you treat yourself with compassion, you are lighting that lamp. And with it, you light the path not only for yourself, but for others who are walking in the dark. Here at Mindfulness, we are committed to keeping that lamp alive, to share stories, practices, and teachings that remind us all, you are not alone. Whether you are just beginning to notice your breath, or you are years into recovery, this channel is a space for connection, healing, and hope. So as we close, I invite you to take one breath, deep, gentle, and full of kindness. Feel the air filling your lungs. Feel your body held by the present moment. This is your refuge. This is your freedom. And no matter what your past has been, your next breath is always a chance to begin again. Welcome home.